So I've been playing around a little bit with vibe coding, mostly in Claude. Um, and yeah, there's a lot of fun stuff that you can do, even without assets, without knowing how to code or how to program in Unity. Definitely some next steps for me is looking at vibe coding for Unity interactions and such, and that's something I'd like to play around with a little bit. We've taken a couple coding courses. I am definitely not a coder, and that's beyond my wheelhouse. But you can make some fun stuff nowadays, and I highly suggest you go in there and experiment. Try out Claude. Try out what you have access to. What you can afford. Definitely, it's easy to hit your limits on something like on Claude when you're vibe coding. So you're probably going to want a pro account just to play around, because you do hit those walls pretty quick. But it really I'm finding that the limit is more your imagination than your technical ability, and I mean, to an extent, of course, but this was a fun little project. I didn't really know that I could do this until I got in there and started playing around. But WebXR, I'm going to talk about a little bit, so we just have a baseline understanding of what that is. Has anybody here played around with WebXR before, or done any HTML, A-frame, XR experiences? Prototyping or projects? Cool. All right. So far a couple no's. So hopefully this is some fun new stuff. Man, the avatar options are so limited that we all look like cult members. I don't know. I'm like just glancing back. Everybody's in this light gray hoodie and black pants, and it's like kind of whoops. Kind of makes me feel like I don't know where to find the Kool-Aid. But yeah, anyway. I know, yeah, I saw that, Angela. I see your comment. Yeah, tried to change it, and it didn't stick. And yeah, mine wasn't really doing that either. I don't know what's going on. But I also see like my edit buttons like not loading. So there's some other funky stuff going on in spatial. But we're not used to that or anything, right, guys? I've never run into any issues on here. Oh, heavy sarcasm if that didn't come through. So yeah, what is WebXR? It is browser based. It's basically HTML code that runs in your web browser. You don't need to run an app or install anything. It's what I made here is just one HTML file that creates a shareable 3D experience. And you can use it on a headset. I have not tested it on headset, so if anybody wants to give that a shot, by all means. I have to dust off my Quest and probably run a couple hours of updates or something before I can do that. But feel free if you want. I'm going to share the file with you guys in just a minute. You can download the HTML file and run it in your own browser. I highly recommend using Chrome. I've not tested it in anything else, but it will work in Chrome. Supposedly it also works on Android mobile, but not on iOS Safari browsers. So if you are an iPhone user, you will not be able to run this on your phone. But supposedly it works on Android mobile, and as I said, Chrome desktop browser. So there's a little blurb down there. The text is really probably too small for this. I apologize. But basically, you can think of WebXR as like the Google Docs of immersive content. It's really light, shareable, and sometimes it's good enough. I feel like that's even a little bit of a stretch. it's rough, not gonna lie, but we're gonna get into next what doesn't work. Definitely a low ceiling on this. It's there, you know, I didn't test any assets out, so it's really going on shapes and polygons. It's not really a good solution for photorealistic or physics heavy simulations, or you know, really heavily interactive, or you know, anything with a lot of assets or visuals. This is probably not the solution for that. I would say more, this is for proof of concept, right? This is for like, let's get an idea into a format, into a 3D format, to just see how it kind of feels. And you know, or you need to pump something out really quickly, and it doesn't really matter what it looks like, or you know, if it's really polished. Again, doesn't work on Safari. There's no built-in LMS integration. There's no tracking or anything like that. So, you know, if you want to integrate API and SCORM, that's going to take additional work, additional files, and some way to connect those things. And that's a little bit, again, beyond my expertise, but definitely kind of like the next step here to play with. And also, you know, as I mentioned, no, I didn't use any 3D models in here. You could potentially upload them to your prompt and then ask, you know, ask your agent to include them. But I did not try that for this, and yeah, would be interesting to see how that works out. But this is, you know, very rough. And really more for concept building. So a couple other considerations: you could host this, you know, on a SharePoint site or anything, and just have people open the HTML file in their browser. You might need, you know, for actual hosting, you might need some IT coordination there. And yeah, again, pretty much prototype and proof of concept. Something, you know, interesting that came up in my feed like today on LinkedIn that I threw the link in here was Tim Slade and Mel Milloway, really great folks to follow on LinkedIn. If you don't, they were talking about kind of vibe-coded deployable projects and the possible death of the e-learning authoring tools. They released their little talk on YouTube, I think just a day ago. I don't know that I can I don't think I can drop links in the chat, but I will. So you want to put this, so you want to type this after youtube.com / and then you can paste that piece in there, and that's the code to the video, or you can Google this title and watch that. Really interesting conversation. I'm only about halfway through it, so because again, I just saw that today, and you know, client work comes first. So yeah, that's a very timely topic of theirs to talk about. You know, how things are kind of changing from you know, just these new capabilities that are at our fingertips with AI and agents and vibe coding, and yeah, definitely two people staying at the forefront of that. So I know it's a good conversation so far. I highly recommend it. And yeah, so this is the link to the demo, so you can just oh, it's not gonna let me do that. All right, you can just go to this URL, or tinyurl.com / and then type that in, XRLXD demo, if you want to download the HTML file and take a look. I'm gonna stop and reshare so I can share the demo with you guys. just a moment. Oh. There we go. All right. Yeah, Angela, Tim is great at making complex topics sound simple. He is a natural instructor, that is absolutely for sure. And I know why he's been successful and why he does. And definitely somebody I've looked up to my most of my career since I started following him on LinkedIn, and seeing some of his presentations at conferences and stuff. Definitely a natural instructor. And yeah, I found out last year that we both turned 40 last year, which is crazy. Sometimes you meet your heroes and you don't realize that you're the same age. Like I don't really tend to really think too much about whether this person is older or younger than me, but it was just like, oh wow. When you meet your heroes and you're the same age, you're like, oh well, that's cool. But yeah, fun, random, pointless fact. um, yeah. Comparison is the thief of joy. Gempez. I don't know, however you want me to refer to you, but yeah. Everybody has their own things, right? So there's no point in comparing to anybody else, but so this is the prototype. I did ask it to start with a little welcome message, so it kind of tells you what's going on here. There's 9 stations to visit. You can move around with your WASD keys, much like a regular video game or browser-based 3D experience. Click on terminals and kind of what they are. And I'm going to hide that. So I'm going to enter my substation. This is Meridian Power Group's new employee orientation. They are a fictional utility company. And we've got little stations here. As you can see, I'm moving around. I can drag the experience with my mouse. Kind of, just how, spatial works when you're on a browser. So I can, wrong window. I can go over here and click on my company overview, and it pops up this fancy window and gives me some information, to read through here. Again, I could potentially give it, more thorough source content. I really asked it to make stuff up based on SoCal Utility Group, and it kind of just took some liberties and made some things up, and I just told it make sure to use fictional names and places and etc. So these are not real people, hopefully, because otherwise it did not follow instructions. But yeah, you could potentially upload image files and ask it to incorporate those. Again, I'm not sure how well that would work. You'd need to try it out and let me know. So just some mission values. Again, this is just content it came up with, so I'm not going to bother, reading through it because it's just not important. I do kind of want to look around. I asked it to create it as a kind of futuristic substation environment and include some, elements in the background that made it look as such, and it did a pretty good job. It's got these power lines and things up here, some cool little particle effects, I guess, that are just kind of floating around. Didn't even know that was possible, but it looks cool, and I kind of like it. The weird glowing rings thing. There's no colliders in here, so you can walk right through objects, and it's not gonna, you're not gonna be obstructed. But I'm not sure if that's something that you would be able to change or not, giving it those instructions. So some kind of how we work, conduct and expectations. Just a little more interactive one, with vocab match game. So, boop. Hope it's not the top one every time. Huh. Looks like it's the top one every time. That's a little problematic. Oh, maybe not. So, well, that could use a little bit of variation for sure. But I do appreciate that there was a check answers button. So here's some of the scenario ones we can take a look at. And I think it did a decent job making these up, being that these are all kind of issues that people kind of need to be aware of based on regulations that affect utility companies. Like accepting gifts is something that you cannot do, and you would need to report something like that. And I asked it to give a little like explanation of why the correct answer was correct. So that was part of my instruction, because I think before it was just in the first iteration of this, it just gave me like, that's correct or that's incorrect, which is not very helpful. Again, we'd want to notify IT, and then it says why it matters, state privacy laws, and there's specific regulations that it references there, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted. Pull. That would be really bad. I believe that's something like insider trading or yep. So, something you would probably report there. I feel like the scenarios are very, I did ask it to like focus on corporate level employees, so not the like field service or technicians or that kind of thing. So this is more like aimed at the utility company's corporate staff. And yeah, that's pretty much all the stations, I think, for the most part. Look at lines of business, I don't think we looked at. So it just made up some places and names and part of lines of business. Yep, and just, yeah, that is that for the most part. So as you can see, like, it's not hi-fi, it is not like beautiful and intricate. There are no real assets here. These are all just shapes and polygons. Oh, sorry guys, I had to go on mute there. I was choking up. Needed to get it out of my throat and take a sip of tea. But yeah, so this is the first prototype, and I know I promised one live, but I did some tests on some other ideas. And I'm going to show you the process rather than run the prompts live, and I'll just show you the prompts and what happened with some of my other iterations, because it takes so long to generate a file. I didn't want you guys to just sit here for like 10 minutes while it's generating an HTML file. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing that, and we'll give you the prompt example that I used. I'm going to just throw that in the chat. And you can basically take, oh, it does not underline there. Bummer. Okay, you know what? I'm going to throw it in Slack real quick. And then you guys can see in Slack the underlined portions are all where you would want to change. some things. And again, with certain ideas, this is going to work better than others, and you will see what I mean in a minute, because boy howdy, it does not always win. Here is the prompt example. So I asked it to build a single A-frame WebXR prototype for blank topic experience based on something, like whether it's a website or source content, document, etc. Or you could just take that part out. Tell it to come up with some information. WASD to move, mouse to look around, click to interact. You want to kind of describe your basic environment theme, colors, or whatever you want in there. You know, if you don't add source material, you probably want to take that bit out. And then kind of describe what you want from the different stations. And then other requirements, you know, you might want to take some of these out. You might want to add them or add some or change some. But like, you know, I just had some basic stuff like I want it to do some kind of celebration effect after I've marked everything complete. But I want the stations to be accessible still. Like I don't want them locked or anything. And some of these came out of, you know, the first iteration. I was like, oh, that's not really what I meant or what I wanted. So, you know, it definitely is an iterative process. And again, you will burn through your credits or usage limits when you're working on these. So let's look at the live fail, because this one was funny. Let me change my sharing again one more time. And the first massive fail that I had, I thought, well, let's like test the limit of this its creativity, right? Like how out of the box can we get? And I was like, all right, what about inside the mouth? Like, let's do an oral biology and oral health experience. And I thought, we're going to put this inside of a mouth and see what a low poly mouth looks like with, you know, maybe some different stations and giving us some, you know, information and background on teeth and gums and all sorts of fun stuff. And oh my god, it actually worked that time. So the first 4 iterations of this one, that enter button did nothing. So I must have inadvertently opened up the right file here. Yes, I did. Okay, so this is the very last one where that button finally got to work. I can kind of look around. This is the most terrifying mouth I have ever seen. Low poly or not, it's pretty bad. It didn't really hit the mark in terms of concept. Pretty sure anybody could build something better with, you know, basic shapes. But yeah, I digress. Let's see how the interactions work. So it actually, when you get up to these orbs, you can click on them. And I thought this particular activity was kind of interesting. So like match the oral condition to the part of the mouth that it affects. So cavities typically affect enamel and dentin. It's a little slow to react. Gingivitis affects the gingiva. Periodontitis affects advanced bone, I want to say. Oral candidiasis, palate and tongue mucosa, pulpitis, probably pulp chamber I'm going to go with. I'm not a dentist, so yeah, awesome. You know, maybe that was a little too easy if I don't, you know, I don't know. Been in a lot of doctors' offices, but I am not one, clearly. But yeah, maybe that was too easy. Maybe it wasn't. I don't know. So this was problematic. I can't actually click on that, or at least it's not doing anything when I do. So that was an issue with some of these. Did not program a space bar to jump. and that is definitely like my instinct is telling me to do that, but it's not doing anything. And I couldn't get really half of these orbs to do anything they were supposed to do, so that was kind of a bummer. So this one I just feel like was a big fail. Didn't really work out for the concept, and I I got a little frustrated at some points. My all caps screaming, most of the orbs do nothing. At this point I was already giving up, and I was just like, all right, let's just see if it gives me something usable, and it did not. So you know, here was my prompt. I pretty much you know, in a different conversation gave it the you know, copy and paste blank prompt that I put in there. So this is in Claude, by the way, Angela. Sorry, I just scrolled down and saw your comment. But yeah, I'm using Claude.ai. And mostly I just prefer it for a lot of tasks. I feel like it just hits the mark more often than ChatGPT. I have been told and heard many times that it is far superior for vibe coding and coding tasks. Things change all the time and every day. I'd like to start playing around with other tools more like Replit and Lovable for vibe coding, but for the little stuff that I'm doing for now, Claude has been more than sufficient for me for all of my everyday tasks. So this included worked out pretty well, except for this one. Clearly, except for the dental one. So here's my prompt. This is basically, you know, what I asked in the other conversation to fill out for me. I said I want to do one, you know, based on oral health and biology. I want it to, you know, the environment to be the interior of the mouth, and etc. Very, very brief. And I asked it to fill this prompt structure out for me. So I didn't even write the prompt myself, really. Could have been where it went wrong. I don't know. But it gave me an outline of what it wanted to do, and it sounded okay. It was like, all right, let's give it a shot. And really, you know, the first one didn't work. Asked it to review for bugs. It did a bunch of stuff. Second one still didn't work. And we kind of went on that circle for a while. It does not work. And I all but gave up when I was actually able to do it. So I will point out that even though Claude lets you have this little preview window, these WebXR experiences won't work in Claude very well. Like, it's not supposed to even load this as well as it is, or at least it told me it wouldn't or couldn't. So, I mean, you could, oh, and look at that, it works better in the preview than it does actually opening it. Go figure. But, yeah, I mean, you could theoretically just test it in here and then, you know, not have to download and open up every HTML file, but they're typically small files, and it wasn't too much of an extra step. But, yeah. So let's look at the last one that I did, which was slightly more successful. So in this one, I asked for a cocoa farming industry and training experience. So just kind of getting acquainted with, you know, how do cocoa beans grow? What's the process? And again, I asked it to fill the prompt out for me using that same structure. Just very briefly told it what I wanted, and then I pasted that prompt into a new conversation, asked it to build it out, which it does take a while, you know, probably 8 to 10 minutes for each file, so plan for some time. Find a movie to watch in between or something. And it kind of gave me the breakdown again of what's included, and I had some feedback, you know, played with the first version. I think this is the first version, And it felt like I didn't need all of that. I didn't need to know all the stations ahead of time. The controls are obviously good to know. This was kind of neat that it gave me this long linear path as if I was like walking down a path between trees. Thought that was kind of cool. But I didn't like that, you know, when I turn around, all the text labels are gone, even though they're kind of messy anyway, and not very attractive. But you know, again, this is what prototypes are for. They don't need to be perfect or beautiful. But I felt like this was a lot of text. Very helpful information, but it kind of like categories started getting messy. I couldn't close this, so that was one of my big problems, was that this X button doesn't do anything. But if I hit the escape key, I can escape. But when I click anywhere else, the last pop-up window that I had comes back. So, and I have to hit escape again. So the mouse became pretty much useless at this point, because as soon as I let go of that mouse button, the last pop-up I looked at pops back up. So that was clearly a functional problem that needed to be fixed. But I can still go through and click on them. And again, a lot of good information, but maybe just a little too wordy, a little too much. Talks about the fermentation process. Let's see if we can get up here to some of the interactive bits. This was kind of annoying. I just didn't like objects in the middle of the pathway there. Really kind of annoying. Yeah, Destry just mentioned Claude is the bomb. I do think so too. Yeah, using your AI tool to help you build better prompts for what you're trying to achieve is definitely a game changer. I think what I was able to create doing that really leveled up after I figured that simple part out. And Claude skill called Prompt Master for Claude. I did not know that. I have been working with my own Claude skills. Like I've made one for Rise, one for Storyline, one for my voice, and for a couple other things. But I haven't tried that out. So I'm definitely gonna have to dig around in that and play with it and see how it improves. So thanks for mentioning that, Destry. Claude's skills prompt master. So as long as I get used to clicking escape after each movement, it's not too bad. I've got this reordering production order activity here I thought was kind of cool. You move stuff up and down with the arrows, but getting them all in the right order. I did try it out. It does work. But yeah, it's a little extra. 7 steps are out of place. Yeah, I figured. And then, there it is again. We're going to go way down to the end. And just look at labor audit. Oh wow, they changed the content for this to the next iteration, so that's interesting. You may want to be specific where you want it to retain content. If you say like, oh, I really like this scenario, keep it or don't change it, you may need to be specific about that. Or at least it will help get you closer to what you want. So I'm going to look at the next iteration of that, actually, let's go back to the Claude page and the prompt. So here I just kind of threw in real messy my feedback, stuff I wanted it to work on. And it might have been a little too aggressive on minimizing the text, so there's the sweet spot for sure. I didn't really like the long linear path. I prefer the circular environment. I feel like it just made it easier to get around. No objects in the middle of the path, didn't like that. Yep. And so that was it. That was only, a couple of bits of feedback. I had my browser experience on one side, and then Notepad open on the other side, just made my notes as I went along and then pasted it in there. So this was the second iteration with my feedback, and it definitely minimized the text. That's awesome. Can look around my environment now in a circle, which is great. There's some random oval shaped Cocoa Pods on the floor. And then I can click on some of these, and as I said, some of these are now a little bit too brief. There's some context lost here that winnow. I don't know what a winnow is. I guess maybe a piece of equipment or a process. I have no idea. I don't make chocolate, but yeah, there definitely is a sweet spot of, oh, see, I didn't even click on the thing, so that was kind of problematic. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it definitely was a little aggressive on cutting the information. Let's see what some of my interactives look like. All right. Again, it doesn't really give me a lot of context for this, so I would have some problems completing that. I would probably go back and iterate on this a few times to get it to where I would really be happy with it. I wonder where my reordering scenario is. No, I can't find it. Ah, here's my country match. So that's cool. No, Ecuador is South America. There we go. Yay, I win geography. Not sure about the educational value of that particular activity. Again, without context, it just feels a little empty. So, the content on this one is something that I would prefer to work on a bit more. But it does get the point across, and it does work as a rapid prototype if I needed to give some sort of basic instructions, maybe to a Unity development team that was working on something. We could, it's definitely a starting point, but not beautiful. I mean, my trees are like lollipops with very sharp edges. And not a lot of depth or texture or anything. As you can see, everything's really smooth. There's just not much in terms of visuals. And that's just the nature of it. That's what makes it a really lightweight, very quick prototyping tool rather than, a fully fleshed out VR XR experience. But yeah, that was kind of, that's the project. I'm gonna stop my share, and those were really all of my slides too. I'm gonna go back and just share the prompt example slide and see if you guys have any other questions. Feel free to speak up and yeah, let me know what you think, and let me know what you think. All right. Yeah, quick quiz building. Absolutely. I was kind of impressed, Angela, with the different types of interactions that it came up with rather than just multiple choice. I mean, there was some of that, but with the reordering activities and matching activities and like, choose the right vocabulary term, it was pretty dynamic. I feel like there was, some good variety in those interaction types, even if they were really, really simple, mostly text-based interactions. Yeah, thank you guys. Thank you, Serene. Yeah, it's really a good place to get started. Play around with your ideas in 3D, in a 3D environment. I'd love to see some samples with it, maybe where the user can actually manipulate physical objects, or even have 3D models introduced. I think that would definitely take it to the next level, and make it a little bit more useful as a prototyping tool. But still pretty awesome that we can do this stuff in 10 or 20 minutes and have it up and working in our browser, with fairly low effort. Yeah, actually, Angela, I think that's a really good idea. Good point. There's no better way to learn than to teach, right? Right. Yep. And instead of having them, do yet another PowerPoint presentation, this might be something a little bit more fun and engaging, and keep their interest. Now, I recently saw a LinkedIn comment about somebody who was doing a master's program on AI, and they mentioned something extremely frustrating about the program was that they were banned from using AI for any of their assignments. And that totally blew me away, because like, what is even the point at that? Like, what's the point? If you're getting a master's degree in AI and you can't use AI, like, somebody did not understand the assignment. Like, the instructors did not understand the assignment, I guess, because that would just be like the best learning opportunity of all, right? Like, figure out what works and what doesn't work, by actually having it, having to use it. And I think that giving learners guardrails, students or learners or whatever, giving them guardrails but freedom of creativity is going to be a really good learning exercise in of itself. Like, at some point they still have to know what they're putting together, know what they're talking about if they're working with the content. Yeah, that's it's crazy, but good schools. It's hard to vet those programs too before you get there. You don't necessarily have insight to all of that as a student, and then the learning experience it comes with a hefty price tag. So hopefully universities are leaning more towards taking feedback from learners and adjusting their curriculum and being a little bit more forward thinking. But typically academia is a very I think if I say safe space, it has the wrong connotation. But a very risk averse space is probably the better way to put it.
A lot of that comes from making sure they don't lose their funding too.
Yeah.
Because we have a lot. I get this a lot, or we all through the years. Why don't you do this, that, or the other? And it's like, we would, but we have like FERPA, and we have a different way we even have to approach people that have disabilities. Like we
Yeah.
can't even diagnose or even talk about it to them. It has we have to like lay the stones for them to walk on and hope that they take them. It's not like
Yeah.
in K through 12 even where they literally can, make sure that they develop IEPs and set things like that. But yeah, where it comes down to is there's a yes, there's a what they call the ivory tower, but some of it is related to you can if you get a FERPA violation and you lose the ability to for your university to use financial aid from the government, your school shut down.
Yeah.
So
There's a lot at
I guess
stake.
that's where that kind of came from a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. There's, and different industries are going to have different challenges like that, right? Um, yeah. And you guys are going to know what those are for your own industries. I don't I worked in higher ed for all of 3 months, so I didn't get too embedded or too in depth on what the requirements are for working in that space. And um, but there are lots, even just like with energy and utilities, they have tons of regulations that they need to adhere to. There's also, I know, for any government organizations, and I think that could include universities. I'm not sure. I think if they are government funded, then I think that they're also held to it. But there are new ADA regulations hitting in April of this year and next year, for depending on the size of the organization, that needs to make everything 2.1 accessible. So that's going to be a challenge for certain organizations, and may make something like this not an option for them. So yeah, you got to know, who you're serving, right?
I think also the current administration kind of took a lot of the a lot of the things that led us in that direction out because I felt like there was a lot in instructional design that was leaning towards like people that are blind. I even when I did some research, they were like in some of I think it was even in spatial at the time. This was a while ago. They were
Yeah.
developing like pathways. So instead of visually seeing the path to get to places, you could use a cane in VR and be able to touch objects like you would in like the real world to like and I think some of those kind of went
Cool.
away, but I imagine if we change, we always keep changing the script,
Yeah.
with, if it goes back in that direction. There was a lot of people I think working in that way, but because that became a very low priority or often or even like not non-existent, like even in higher ed, it doesn't feel like there's a lot of things that were high priority are anymore, like for inclusivity. It'll be interesting to see that all come back. But
Yeah. Yeah. That sounds like a really neat experience. It reminds me, there was a VR experience that I don't think I tried it actually, but I think I downloaded it and never got around to trying it. But I think it's like a blindness simulator. And yeah, I mean, I was kind of curious how you would achieve that in VR, but yeah, I'll have to dust off that quest and find out. Has anybody seen that or tried that out? Did anybody try that one out on Quest? Huh.
it's interesting when you take away your ability to see because I had to pick a disability for one of my classes and I went into groups where educators work with the blind. And it's a fascinating, using other senses. So yeah, but in VR it's really hard because it's based on sight most of the time. But
Yeah.
how did you get to be able to put these prompts together? Was this something like, is there like a structure that you're going off of? Um, like, or is this like you've learned kind of how to do this and you've just evolved your prompting? What is your process there?
Really messy. Really messy. I usually come with a half-baked idea, and I'll start a conversation and just very casually talk to it and just say something like, "Hey, I want to build a thing like this, can you help me do it?" And it'll usually give a bunch of more information than I actually want, and some options, of what will achieve whatever I'm trying to do. And it's funny because I was trying out different stuff like, vibe coding little HTML blocks for Rise. And I think in that webinar, the Tim Slade and Mel Milloway webinar that I shared earlier, they were talking about how, somebody vibe coded a Flipkart interaction for Rise. It's like, yeah, Rise already has that though. Like, why do you need that? And that's actually one thing that I had tried out and tested, and it was kind of like, wait, what's the point of this? Like, it's already in there. Like, it's so not all the ideas that it comes up with make sense, right? Because it's not thinking through problems logically like that. If you just ask AI, "Hey, what can you do?" it's going to tell you what it can do, and it's not there are no feelings behind it. There's no personification, right? There's nobody making decisions on, oh yeah, that makes sense to do or not do. It's just going to tell you what the capabilities are based on what it thinks you want. So it doesn't always have good ideas. But
I
I knew you could do browser-based 3D experiences, right? Because that's what we're in right now. At least I am. I'm on my computer, and I am using my mouse to look around and my keys to move around, and so I knew that was possible. And it was just a matter of asking it to help me figure out how to do it, and from there, it was okay. Now, if I wanted to replicate this, what type of prompt structure should I use? And that's kind of what I was referring to earlier, is like getting having it help you with your prompts. Like, say, okay, I want to make something like this, and say it gives you a version and you're like, hey, this is great. Whatever that is, whether it's a story or an article or a WebXR experience, whatever it is, if it gives you a result you're happy with, you can ask it, what prompt do I need to use if I want to replicate this in a new conversation? And then add, be brief and concise to everything else you say, because otherwise you're going to get like the longest novel version that you could imagine. I hope that helped answer question. I rely on it to give me its own prompts all the time. Do you need the vision in mind first, or can you get it to be creative by giving it a brief and learning objectives? This was an example of it giving me ideas of what it could do. I didn't tell it to make a WebXR experience. I said, this is what I want. Can you help me do it? And it said, yeah, here's some options. And then I went with the easiest sounding one, honestly. but yeah, if you and a lot of the time, you know, especially when you're looking at like maybe creating portfolio pieces or something like that, um, it's easy to get tripped up on like, oh well, I don't have content, like I can't share my clients' work, I can't you know, just come up with something, because it's hard to come up with something out of nothing, right? And I would say, like, you know, some things it's just looking around the room and deciding on a thing. You know, I with the cocoa thing, I was stumped for ideas. It was the dental thing was because of a client that we're working with, that kind of made me think of that. And then the cocoa thing was, I saw a small package of dark chocolate I have in my office that was kind of calling out to me, not so quietly, and I was like, oh, chocolate. How is chocolate made? And then that was the basis for my content. So, or even like the utility example, you know, that's based on a client that we worked with for many years, and I didn't want to use their name, I didn't want to use their company, but I asked it to loosely base it on this company or group of companies. And then it probably went on and found all the information it could on their website, and that was, you know, the beginning of it just, you know, using that as a basis, rather than directly, you know, using the name or any of the specific company information. So I guess maybe everlasting quail. I think that was a little bit of both. You don't need to have a fully fleshed out vision. Sometimes it does better with less instruction, but and definitely I've found, like, you know, after the first iteration of something, I can look at it and see what I don't want. You know, that's a lot easier for me to identify what I don't want, right? Like I don't want there to be objects in the middle of the path that don't have any purpose, because that's just in my way. I do want it to have functioning buttons. You know, those things are kind of important. So sometimes just getting it to spit something out, even if it sucks, gives me a basis for knowing where I want to go next, I guess. So yeah, I've got another minute or two if we have any other questions. Awesome. Well, yeah, I hope that was helpful. I hope it was fun. It was fun for me to play around with. So thank you guys for the opportunity. Again, I'm glad I got to hang out and share with you guys again. I'll have to come by more often, for sure. All right. Well, happy Wednesday, everybody. Thank you for coming by. I did record today's session, so fingers crossed if everything worked out okay with the recordings. I will get that over to the YouTube channel, and yeah, thank you all again. I put the prompt example in the Slack channel, so you can copy and paste it and adjust it for whatever you need, however you need. But again, sometimes just chatting with it casually is just as effective. So just play around and experiment and have fun. Okay. Thank you guys. Have a great night.